All right. Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. And we're about to start. It's 5:30. Thanks for coming, everybody. It's very nice to have a full house tonight. And thanks to the AFC associate members who joined us tonight. We are very pleased tonight to showcase a new look development tool. I know it's probably for most of you guys another addition to a long list of look development tools, but this one is very special because this one comes from the need that was felt by our friends here to create something different, something that would be really a bit more accurate to the needs of DPs and DITs on set. And as you will see in a minute, it's really a super powerful tool to create bespoke looks, very unique for your films. It's now developed as an OFX plugin. It could be developed as another type of tool or standalone tool. And so we will start in the conference. We will start with a brief technical view of this look development, and then we will do a more long presentation of the tool itself. And then at the end, we're going to have a couple of case studies, and then we'll take questions. So please welcome two of the people who developed those tools. This is Martin Roux, who is a fellow AFC associate, and Olivier Patron here, who is a DIT and a member of the French DIT associations.
Well, thank you. I will start with some theory, so bear with me. I tried to keep it as short as possible, but we want to share with you the concepts and ideas that are behind what we built. So, to start on a common ground, I will first introduce some concepts about what a digital image is, and which processes are involved from capture to display. So, the journey of an image begins with capturing its data from a real-world scene. We will use a camera, of course, which is basically a measuring device, converting physical light quantities into digital values. The raw data is then organized in such a way that it will be ready to be processed as elements of an image to be displayed later on. This organization includes demosaic or debayering, color matrix application, logarithm encoding, white balancing, and so on. So let us summarize this first step, as the digital encoding. It is a non-departure place for all our values. But these values cannot be displayed just like that. They will be very unsatisfying to watch. We need a new step designed to transform pixel values in order to be properly displayed. And I will call this step the development step. It will give us the ability to display the image in a visually satisfying representation. And development is our main subject today, so let's dig into it. Why do we need to develop? Well, it is all about human perception, and how much a difference there is between perceiving an image and perceiving the real world. When we look at the reality around us, already at the very early stages of the vision process, our visual system is interpreting the captured data, sorting, enhancing, classifying, and in the end, giving us the ability to extract useful information from what is surrounding us, and throwing away what might be considered as distracting or not top priority at the moment. So what we perceive of the world is a representation of it. The world we see exists only in our mind. But when we look at an image, be it a painting or a photograph, we are experiencing a mediated representation of reality. We know we are looking at an image, and it is a deal we agree to make in front of this representation, leading to different cognitive responses. And this disparity explains why one cannot simply watch a direct recording of reality and achieve the same emotional or visual experience. We need to take into account these expected differences in perception. And we can do that at the development stage, tweaking pixel values that are to be displayed in order to produce a visually appealing and coherent depiction of the scene as we shot it. Let's illustrate some of these differences we consider. As an example, if I look at a landscape with a lot of details, grasses, bushes, various elements, I will not feel overwhelmed. My visual system will smoothly sort the information from all the incoming visual data so that I can focus on what is important to see. And it goes back to survival. I don't want to know how many flowers there are in front of me when a tiger is about to jump at my throat. I only want to see the tiger on where the escape route is. However, if I look at an image of this very detailed landscape in a movie theater with no tiger involved, I might struggle to comprehend the essential elements of the shot. Too many informations will break my ability to grab at a glance the composition and the meaning of the shot. Another example can be presented with high saturations. If I look at a road worker outside, I will not feel overwhelmed by its orange vest. I will just identify her or him as a worker. But if I were to display the same amount of saturation on a movie screen, the orange of the vest could be distracting and turning me away from the focus point of the shot. And we can also consider how dynamic range is handled and what is the path from the scene dynamic range towards the image dynamic range. We human beings are able to encounter a very broad set of dynamic ranges around us. Our visual system will adapt once again to focus on what might be important to see. Today's displays, even the most brighter ones with the most deeper blacks, cannot hold real-world dynamic range. There will be whiter whites than the display maximum white and darker blacks than the display black. Moreover, as for the quantity of details reproduced, we might not even want to see this kind of brightness or this kind of darkness on the movie screen. We only need to see an interpreted representation of what the scene was. Something that will make us remember how bright and white a cloud can be in the sunshine. So, what can we do to reduce the source dynamic range into the displayed limited dynamic range? It is important to note that our cameras will hold almost all the real-world dynamic range, so the data will be there. The question that arises is, what do we do with all that data? We need to sort the available dynamic range. And we do that by compressing highlight on low light values, and on the opposite, by amplifying mid-range values, where proper camera exposure meets the focus point of the scene. This kind of operation can be summarized by a simple curve, the S-curve, called like that because of its S-looking shape. So in the end, we get more shades available for the midtones, and we throw away shades where we don't need them. So in the end, we need to develop, to enforce some data hierarchization, an organization that will address both the cognitive disparities we talked about and the constraints of our display technologies. And I will call this part of image development the color mapping. Color mapping allows us to achieve a proper and watchable image. But this is just the starting point. Our ambition is to carry the image further, making it beautiful, rich, and meaningful. And to get there, we will need a second stage of the development process, the look stage. The look will permit to go from a watchable image, an OK image, to a better representation. If color mapping is an objective process, the look must be subjective. It will carry the artistic and visual uniqueness of a given project. Nonetheless, there is a scientific component of this quest of better imaging. Indeed, many psychophysical studies have been conducted about the color of objects, the memories we hold of these colors, and our preferences about color reproduction. All these studies tend to indicate that we share common preferences when it comes to color representation, preferences that will always differ slightly from reality. And this phenomenon can be partially explained by how our memory tends to simplify its recording of the world. Then what is an improved or enhanced representation? It is not about making a perfect and faithful copy of the world. It is more about crafting a representation that will recall our memory of it. For example, we might frequently remember highly vibrant colors as darker and less saturated than they really were. If a look is reducing saturation and darkening the same reproduced colors, the resulting image will appear more satisfying. So an improved representation is more about our subjective recollection of reality than it is about objective accuracy. This is quite stimulating for us, as it gives us freedom to pursue our creative intents and to reach the artistic vision of the project at hand. So I will quickly illustrate what it means in front of an image. And I will start by showing you something that is totally forbidden, a logarithmic image not suitable for display. It's just data accidentally put on the screen. So let's apply color mapping now. The image is now watchable with proper contrast and regular distribution of shades, tones, and saturations. But it still lacks artistic direction though. That's what you look at when you apply a standard Rec 709 lookup table, for example. Now, let's craft an evolved representation of it while we add one specific look to the development process. The color palette narrows, the contrast becomes directive, and our perception of the shot evolves. It is guided by the artistic choices we just enforced. Okay, let's go technical now. The question will be, which workflow gives us total freedom to create a look in our development? So, I'd like you to visualize the continuum between the undeveloped image and the fully developed image, a pleasing and meaningful image for the project at hand. At the edge of the fully developed image is the territory of the proper image, the OK image, the one that is watchable. And in between is the territory of the unknown, an unclear state of the image where contrast feels off and saturations might look strange. Okay, let's look at the traditional photochemical journey through this. Kodak, Fuji, or Agfa would lead us straight towards the fully developed image realm. That's good, but it is going to be challenging to get to another spot, to move away from the prescribed look. Photochemical science is prescriptive. Color mapping and look are applied in one inseparable stage. Okay, let's follow now something very opposite, a fully liberal digital workflow path. We depart from the undeveloped image state, a log image, for example, and we adjust contrast and shades and saturations by hand. Looking at our display, interactively adjusting every aspect of the color's behavior, and hoping to carry every piece of the color volume with us, we will struggle to cross the no man's land of the unknown state of the image. But eventually, we might achieve a gratifying result that could be somewhere Kodak or the others did not grant us the freedom to go. But all the solid ground of the color mapping is bypassed. Color mapping should be achieved through fixed, mathematical, and reproducible operations, tailored to the needs of our biased perception of the image. Eyeballing this part of development means introducing a lot of accidents in it. What it means is that it will be very challenging to maintain this result. Everything might fall apart with a different type of scene or a different display target. Let it be HDR, for example. That is why we would prefer to take the path where the no man's land crossing is managed for us. A color-managed workflow can do that. Its main design is rooted in its strong color mapping. We can then only focus on finding the right look to get to a precise spot inside the meaningful image kingdom. And this work will be carried to other display targets easily and will apply to other type of scenes seamlessly. I will just quickly summarize what a color-managed workflow is. It is simply a system that allows us to get diverse data sources and to apply a set of straightforward mathematical operations that will align them within a shared working color space, where we will conduct color grading and where we will apply the look. From there, the color mapping will handle the adaptation to different display technologies. And as about which color mapping or which color managed workflow we have to choose, it doesn't matter that much. But it happens that we fine-tuned the tools we are going to show you today with the ACES 1.3 color mapping, as it is widely used and software agnostic. But we also use our tools in the field with other color mappings as well, with very good results. Okay, now that we know a little better about why we might want a look and in which environment we are going to build it, let's go into the details of what a look really is and how does it differ from color grading. If the color mapping gives us a standard rendering, the look carries all the operations that will distort, compress, or expand the color palette to suit our needs. The look also applies to a broad set of shots across the entire project, while color grading is more of a shot-by-shot approach. If we consider a geometric representation of a color volume, before we apply the look, we get a well-structured volume. No twist, every shade of colors or tones are equally spaced in every direction. But the application of the look will involve all the geometric deformations that will manipulate the volume, shaping it the way we'd like it to be. Getting high green saturations a darker tone, for example, or giving yellow hues a more reddish-orange tint, and so on. Allowing us to tighten some areas while expanding some others, and in the end, narrowing the range of color possibilities. And I want to call that an expressive color palette reduction. So, with that in mind, we need to talk about the operations involved. There are mathematical functions. They need to form robust deformations once they will not introduce breaks and cracks in the volume. We also want these operations to be parametric so that we can adjust the result to our creative needs. And finally, they must be global, continuous, and non-destructive, carrying all parts of the color volume with them, even parts we are not monitoring while crafting the final look. As a side note, part of these properties are exactly what the lookup table is not, because the LUT is made of fixed sampled colors with a limited range. You cannot edit parts of it, you would have to accept it as it comes. So a LUT is not satisfactory for our creative ambitions. That is why continuous and editable mathematical functions applied on the fly are way superior for us. Okay, finally, a look can be divided in only 3 parts. One contrast curve, a set of color tone curves, and specific color guidelines that will enforce color behavior according to some input color properties. Hue changes based on the considered volume area, density alterations according to saturation, and so on. Okay, we are almost done. We know what we want. We are getting very close to our objective, but which tools can allow us to build such a solid look? We can think of classical grading software tools like DaVinci Resolve. We can craft a look with grading operators, but we must be very careful of which operations we apply and where, because these grading operators were meant to adjust the image we are currently watching, not to be global operators on colors far beyond what we see. Another grading software is Baselight, and with its 6th version comes a special operator, Chromogen. This operator was entirely designed for look creation. It is very powerful, but of course it is for Filmlight products only. There are other tools delivered as plugins that could be also be mentioned, but either they are not well suited for film post-production workflows, or either they are only a catalog of defined looks, finely crafted ones, but not parametric ones. So, all this brings us to why we are here today. We are here to present you with the outcome of our research this past few years, which has led to the release of 2 tools, Diachromie, focused on the color aspect of the look development, and Diaphanie, which addresses the texture dimension. These tools are offered today as plugins for DaVinci Resolve, and we will show them to you right now with a case study introduced by Martin.
Thank you. So, yeah, you can applaud if you want.
Thank you.
So now that we've seen what a look is made of, let's go to a practical example with you by developing a look for a feature film. So by the time Olivier leaves this keynote presentation to open a DaVinci session that will allow us to manipulate images, I'm going to tell you a little about the film we've taken as an example, So it was shot and released in France, and I was the cinematographer. And so to build its look, we used this tool we are presenting to you today. So Diachromie for color manipulation and Diaphanie for texture manipulation. So it enables you to build a robust mathematical model that will develop all the images in the film to give it its own signature. So this film is called La Morsure, Beaten in English. It's directed by Romain de Saint-Blanca, and it's set in France in the late 60s. It tells the story of two teenage girls who sneak out of the religious boarding school where they are confined to join a party in an abandoned house. Françoise, the main character, believes that her dreams are premonitory, and she's convinced that this is her last night and that she needs to experience as much as possible. In the middle of the night, the film shifts into a softly fantastical atmosphere and become a kind of a dreamlike tale about adolescence. So set in the 60s in one hand and borrowing from fantasy in the other, the film needed its own singular image, one that could combine in the same story both the very concrete reality of adolescence and the magic of the fantasy atmosphere. So the film has also a large nighttime section to shoot, and we knew right away that we wanted to shoot on digital because we wanted to be able to create maximum lighting effect at night. And to do that, we needed high low light capabilities. For example, we wanted the moonlight to move from time to time, shifting all the cast shadows in a completely surreal way. And to achieve this, we wanted to use drones with light, like flying projectors, but we knew we couldn't rely on high-powered light. So shooting on film, as can be tempting in this kind of plastic scenario, seemed like a bad idea. Instead, I went for a camera that was very capable in low light, and I knew from then that all my textural and color behavior would have to be produced mathematically. As you can see, it has quite a distinctive look, quite vintage also, but I think that for a demo like we do, it's a good example. So, that's what we're going to do right now with Diachromie and Diaphanie. So let's change the timelines and have a look on the tool. So Diachromie and Diaphanie are parametric tools with a large number of sliders, as you can see on the right part of the screen. For us, parametric means that every phenomenon produced with the tool is mathematically generated and can be fine-tuned continuously, and there's no imposed filters or fixed behavior, as is often the case with plugins that work with LUTs or sample data. Each sliders operate a mathematical variable, and each of these mathematical variables operate a small aesthetic behavior. With these tools, you'll see the vast and complex question of looks can be broken down into a sum of smaller questions, much easier to digest. So this cursor and these questions are divided in Diachromie in three parts: contrast, color tone curve, and 3D transformation, which are the three areas that fully qualify a look. That means that your favorite look or LUT or the most complex photochemical emulsion can be synthesized into a contrast curve, a color tone curve, and a color volume modification. So theoretically, you can do anything. The only barrier is the level of complexity required. For a look development tool, the complexity cannot be infinite at the risk of rendering the tool unusable for human. And that's a subjective and complex part in developing such a tool. What's the right level of complexity or finesse? So here's the look development timeline. Diachromie so operates in ACs, and this timeline contains a multitude of images from different cameras, but the color management in ACs allows us to manipulate them all with the same tools and produce a look that will have the same properties on all these images. Since this is precisely what we're talking about. We're looking to produce a global color behavior, like a digital film stock, and not just grading few shots. Also, on the look development timeline, we'll be looking for as many situations as possible, as many different conditions as possible to develop looks that respond coherently to any real-life situation. To start developing a look, you don't need to shoot test. In fact, it's easier to start building a color behavior on a large number of somewhat random images before refining it on images that are more closely aligned to the project, like actual tests. So right now, Diachromie as a preset loaded, and you can see that it applies to all the images and situation, and if we bypass it, you can see that its effects, although quite pronounced, behave quite fluidly on all the situation. Bear in mind that none of these images are graded. I mean, there is no shot-by-shot grade. It's just the same image development math. This plastic state of the image must be the one we find on the first day of our grading. Because grading just means optimizing a shot in its narrative continuity and its difference from developing. The look you see here is still entirely editable because all the sliders can still be modified. But as far as we're concerned, we're going to start from zero and create an original look for the film. And to be able to produce a look, we have to be able to name the phenomena we're going to produce. It's an essential element in creating a look, because the immensity of the possibility make it rather difficult to work on instinct. And you must conceptualize a rendering to be able to achieve it robustly. So the director came to me with a whole range of references, from the direct cinema of the 60s to the fantasy cinema of the 70s. And we settled on two films together, Ken Loach's Case and Joseph Losey's Accident. What we liked in these two films was, on the one hand, the vivid and simple naturalism of Case, and on the other, the slow and heavy sophistication of Accident. These two films were shot very close together, probably with the same film stock, and they share a lot of plastic properties, like a fairly marked contrast, a fairly poor color rendering. If we look at this one, there is very few colors. There's a lot of magenta in the skin, a dominant green in the highlights. In short, all kind of things that makes the image sometimes terribly concrete and dirty, and sometimes very plastic and distant, like an aesthetic signature of the monopack film of the late 60s. We really like this image because they are far removed from contemporary aesthetic standards. So the ideal way to produce this kind of transformation is to have color and gray samples to serve as a reference. And it turns out that Laurent Ripoll, the colorist of La Morsure, of my project, had just graded a documentary on Jacques Tati. And one day, as we were talking about the look, he showed me a few scans of the tests made by Jacques Tati for Playtime. So here they are. So that's truly great data, first. We're delighted to see that. And we can see shots, costume, props in different situations. And that gives us an idea of how that film looked at that time. We can take a closer look on a gray shot. So if you look at that, you see that there is quite a lot of blue in the low light. There is a good amount of magenta in the midtones, and the highlights are like yellow-green. So the color tone curve is actually quite chaotic. Now if we look at a color chart, we can see how distorted the color of these color charts are. I mean, the red is slightly orange, the yellow is orange too, the green and the blue are quite off. The green is totally desaturated and blue, and in short, everything is very distorted. But the skins are okay. If we look at the skin, we see that even if it's very distorted, the skins are nice. And if we look at the high saturation, we can see that they are like compressed and contained, and also like darker than they should be, I suppose. So let's keep that in mind. And with this color sample in mind, along with the images from Accident and Case, we're starting to define what we're looking for in terms of contrast, color tone curve, and specific color guidelines. That's to say, deformation of the color volume. So let's start with the contrast. As we want to make a film that has a form of contemporaneity, I think we don't need to imitates an old film in particular, so we're going to make a rather film-like curve, but not exactly the same than case and accident. So we open the contrast tab, and all we have to do is answer a series of small questions that can be presented as follow. What contrast slope do we want? To produce a film rendering, we're going to get a contrast with a straight part of the curve quite steep. You can see that we are modifying the contrast with a pivot point that's obviously at the neutral gray, which guarantees that we are producing a curve that is neutral on the exposure. Then after increasing the contrast, we're going to soften the top and the bottom of the curve, since only the straight part, the mid-range, needs to have that strong contrast. So the next question is, how do we want our curved shoulder, both in terms of height and break angle? And we can repeat the same operation with the toe. We want a little harder toe, and we want a very soft shoulder. We can add slightly more complex behavior, such as a break in the middle of the curve, which will result in a straight part with slightly more contrast below the neutral gray and slightly less contrast above it, bringing the skin to the fore. Thus, by adjusting a few mathematical behavior sliders, we have crafted a curve whose complexity exceeds what could easily be created with grading tools such as Lift Gamma and Gain, but which remain completely parametric. So now if we have a look on the many clips we have in the timelines, we can see that this rather subtly designed curve produces satisfactory and equivalent results everywhere, and that it works in most situations. That is not to say that the only contrast curve possible, but it has a satisfactory level of robustness. For La Morsure, our project, I think it's a good track because it's both high contrast and soft in the highlight, so that's just what we need. So we're going to move on to the next part, which is the color tone curve part. As we saw on the playtime test, we want our low light to be cool, we want magenta in the midtones, and we want highlights more yellow-green. So you can see that Olivier can show patches to set these three hues. And once we've chosen the hue, we can turn up the saturation on different parts of the curve. So let's say we want a lot of yellow-green in the highlight. Magenta needs to remain relatively discrete at the risk of turning the whole image magenta. The midtones are quite critical. And we want a moderate amount of blue in the low light, since we have a lot of scene in penumbra, nighttime scene, and we don't want them to be completely tinted. Then, for example, you can neutralize the upper part of the curve, which is very useful if you are preparing an HDR grading, so that the highest values, the specular one, are not too tinted. You can also select more finely the zone corresponding to the neutral, high, or low, and thus get three curves. Once again, difficult to produce with such a level of complexity with grading tools. At any time, you can go back over the hues, for example. It creates fascinating curve movements, but also on contrast, on any other parameter, and all the other behavior will follow. So we're going to stick to the plan and keep those hues. And once again, we can go to see other images and look at what this color curves produce. As you can see, it already marks the image a great deal. And obviously, these hue drifts don't correspond to every artistic direction, but we mustn't lose sight of the fact that we are moving toward a 60s style. So I think that's fine. And that leaves us with the last and most complex part of the job, deforming the color volume. So if we display a cubic volume representation of the image, we can see that the cube has remained homothetic. I mean, the cube is still a cube. And what we're going to do now, thanks to a large number of sliders, is to answer the question, how do we want our reds? How do we want our yellows, blues, etc.? By touching these variables, the cube will deform very harmoniously, producing compressions and dilations that will produce color ranges that are wider in places or narrower in other places. For example, if the green vertex, or corner if you want, slides towards cyan, and if the yellow vertex slides towards orange, we produce a dilation in the zone of the green that corresponds to the vegetation, thus widening the range of colors reproduced in the green and giving a feeling of greater richness in the vegetation. If you look at the image, maybe Olivier, you can do it a little bit more. More dilation.
More dilation. Okay, yeah, sure.
After the dilation,
Wait a lot.
there is like more blue green and more yellow green, which lead us to see like a wider range of green, and it looks like just richer in terms of reproduction of the vegetation, and so a little bit nicer. So now the question is to produce the distortion we've identified, called faded green, orangey yellows, slightly orangey reds, slightly muted blue, contain high saturation, etc. So there are several mathematical operators per vertex, and the operators have complex behaviors, such as making the density of a color evolve as a function of its saturation, or limiting the progression of high saturations, or adding a form of vibrancy to the dark saturation, etc. And these are just some of the behaviors we've developed to take the image in many different directions. Compression and dilation will always be involved, and our aim is to ensure that they serve our aesthetic project. Of course, it's a time-consuming job, and it takes a few hours to make it properly, because each vertex has to be shaped separately. So Olivier has just twisted the U, and we're going to work on the green vertex, which has quite an obvious behavior. So we want way less saturation on the green. We want the very saturated color to be darker, the saturated green. We want a little bit of brightness so that the low saturated green are a bit pale, and we are going to put back a little bit of saturation in the low saturated green so that they don't turn to gray, because we've removed a lot of saturation in the green. And so you see how the shape has changed. And now we can have a look on other images to see how it behaves. And so we've got a totally new behavior for the green, which can be a starting point for that look. And so you have to repeat this operation on each vertex. As it's a bit time-consuming, we're going to take a shortcut and load a preset we've prepared for this presentation, because all the color behavior can be stored as presets and can be reloaded and modified later. It's much smarter than storing a look as a LUT, because a LUT has a definitely fixed state of the look. And it's not smart at all in terms of writing information. Bear in mind that a LUT of size 65 used in post-production represents about 3 or 4 times the length of the Bible in terms of number of characters. It's a pretty inefficient method, which has other advantages, but with a tool like Diaphanie, you can store a look with just a few dozen values, and it can be still modified later on. So now that we have a complete look, which is fine, maybe we should have a look on images more closer to the project. No, just last thing. let's have a look on the skins, because we are talking about skin tones just before. You can see that the skin are quite even, just like we've seen on the images. There's a lot of magenta in it, but it's I mean it's on purpose. But as we've put the yellow vertex toward orange and the red vertex toward orange too, we are like compressing that zone of the volume, which correspond to the zone of the skins, and so there is less color disparity on the green magenta axis, and so the skin tones are a little bit more even, and it often look nicer. So in this look there is also a lot of magenta because it's a 60s style. We can also of course remove it, but I think that's a good start. Let's go to the tests I've made for La Morsure. So it's projector test because I've used a lot of Fresnel spotlight. So we can see that it had the behavior we were waiting for. It looks quite vintage already. Nice skin tones, a lot of magenta in the skin, like a compressed color palette with high saturation muted, blue in the low lights, magenta in the middle, yellow-green in the highlights, and it helps the art direction a lot, I think. Look at how the coat is compressed, and that's a good start, but maybe we need to go further and add a little bit of texture to it. So let's add a diaphany, and let's put the texture. Diaphany works the same way as diachromie. There's a large number of parameters that perform spatial modulation of the image. You can modulate the image according to spatial frequencies, adding diffusion or halation, grain, and there is more to come. For example, the frequency equalizer can be used to reduce the presence of certain bands of detail, or on the contrary, to increase the modeling of certain parts, but without making any selection. If you look at the lace of the actress costume on the left, you'll see that this fine detail belonging to the high frequencies can be modulated in terms of presence, but without really affecting the global image definition. This kind of tool has been available in Baselight for some time, but our math are just a little bit different. For our look, we're going to lower the high frequencies, not to have too much resolving power, and we're going to increase the contrast of the frequencies just above to add modeling to the image, imitating a little the acutance of the film. Then we can add halation, which is like a local diffusion. That will soften the highlight a little bit. You can see that in the left part of the screen. This too is fully adjustable. There's also diffusion, fully parametric too. We are not going to use it right now because I've already used vintage lenses on this test, and we don't want too much like texture. And then we're going to add a little grain, as Diaphany incorporates fully parametric mathematical grain model. Unlike some plugins, there is no scan grain behind this model. Some plugins put a layer of grain on top, which raises a number of questions concerning the interaction with the image. With a mathematical grain model, you can generate a completely filmy grain, or on the contrary, a finer and more digital one, and modulate these interactions with the image according to density, saturation, frequencies, etc., for a richer and more natural interaction with the image. So let's put just a standard filmy grain. And here we are with the rather basic texture layer, but that incorporates everything we're looking for. And maybe we can now look at real footage from the film. So that's actual footage from the film. Maybe we can have a look on the AC's color mapping first. So that's AC's color mapping. And let's put the look back. So you see that the impact of the look is massive. The contrast brings a lot of structure to the scene. The color palette is much more compact, quite pretty skins. It really helps the art direction because the whole set and costume look homogenized in terms of patina and hue, and it really brings the character to the fore. Let's have a look on the next one. Yeah, look at the color of the ruler on the chartboard. Sorry. You see how
The Rec 709, just color mapping.
yeah, that's yes. So
And with the look on.
So the hue drift is huge, but it's totally fine with the artistic direction, and it helps a lot. It helps a lot, of course, the lighting too, because that mannerism, fits really well with that kind of look. Yeah, I love this one because can you bypass it?
Bypassed.
Yeah, bypassed. So first of all, you can see that the exposure is preserved. Let's put back the look. Yeah. So you can see the lens behavior first is that's Cook F3 with a lot of vignetting, and you can see how the curve is enhancing that vignetting. There is no color grading on that shot. There is just the right white balance and the right exposure, but that's just the same image development math, and you can see how the green is compressed. You can see the color tone curve with blue on the background, magenta in the skin, and you can see how the texture of the lenses are complemented by the look. And if we have a look on other lighting situation, maybe a nighttime scene, you can see how still the same look is behaving very well, because and that's a proof of what we call robustness. It's good math, and so it behaves nicely in all the situation because it has been carefully crafted. Yeah, maybe bypass on this one. Look at how the green is desaturated with the look. So that's AC's color mapping. Let's put the look back. So I think it's way better with the look. The character are bringing to the fore. Yeah, you can see how the skin tones behave. It's very nice, even if it's very distorted. We have nice skin tones with it, with a little bit more of saturation, more fine detail, but still something very quite even. And this one, bypass again. You can see how the set is helped by the look, with the character brings to the fore. And well, we have something like a final look. So that's almost the end of that demonstration. But let's do a less manipulation. As we've already said, the look can be modified very easily with all those parameters. So you can create a look from scratch, but you can also create a look from another look, because you like one or few of the color behavior or contrast behavior in the look. So let's say I need a new vintage look for a TV series, for example. But so this one, I spent a lot of time creating this one. I don't want this one. too vintage for my project, for my new hypothetical project. So let's say I'm going to modify it to get a new one that fits with my ambition. So I want something much more digital in terms of texture. So less frequency stuff, like more high frequencies, but maybe something with a bit misty, so lowering the low frequencies to have something which is much more fine in the high frequencies, but soft on the contrast. And then we're going to maybe reduce the halation also, so that's less vintage, less like filmic. And then choose a more digital grain, much smaller, much more discrete. So with just a few clicks, we've changed the grain. And then we're going to reshape the color behavior. I like the 3D part of the color behavior, the modification of the color volume, but I think that the color tone curves are very vintage. That part of the look is maybe the more vintage. I mean, it's too chaotic. So let's remove totally the color tone curves to make the neutral axis totally straight, and maybe just a little bit less contrast, and that's it. And now let's bypass that look. We still have a look which is so that's AC's color mapping. Let's put back the look. So we still have a very strong look, but it's much more precise, much more digital. And let's put back the look we've crafted before. And you can see that, it's totally a new look. That's the first look, the look from La Morsure. And let's put back the new digital one. Yeah, it's totally different. So it's very easy to create a look from another look. And so from project to project, you can keep like specific behaviors that you love and keep it and rebuild it. And it's a very creative approach, and it's very emancipating. So that's the end of the demo. In conclusion, I'd like to say that what's important for me that using dedicated look development tool, which in my case are Diachromie and Diaphanie because we've developed it, but it can be Chromogen, which is a gorgeous tool. Using this tool systematically, it's given all my project a meeting point in terms of look creation platform. It means that there's no distinction in level of finishing between projects. I mean, a long and costly look research for a well-funded project can produce presets that can be used for smaller indie projects. And the more you think in terms of color and texture behavior, the more you can name the phenomena you're looking for, the phenomena you love, and this clarify the path to a given result. It also makes you more aware of what needs to be produced by a particular piece of equipment, or what, on the contrary, is like material independent. For example, I attach much less importance to cameras. Once I know I've got a good color transformation to my working space, and I concentrate on more decisive parameters for me. And each project serves the same knowledge base, so there's no going back to zero in terms of result, and you're still progressing, and that part is very emancipating. And it's true for a DOP, but it's also true for post-production facilities or a colorist, and that's what we wanted to share with you today. Thanks for your attention.